the way, the title is naming. And the reason for that is with the emotions, with the studies on the emotions, it was all about defining the dimensions of the emotion, the categories of the emotion, naming the reaction that would be induced in a person. It was all about categorization, naming, and determining how these things would act. That's how it started out. But the other part of it being naming is that this project has changed my identity, and the realization that naming and categorization and labeling of emotions and that manipulation of that thing through these names that we apply to it, that's not enough. You have to get into it past the name to find its meaning. Name implies a meaning or an identity of a thing, and my identity has changed. My meaning and the way I perceive meaning of things like emotions particularly has changed. Through this project, as well as through what began to inspire the project, which is the Crisis Center and the work I've been doing there, the training I got there. So the meaning of words like devastation, stuck, and so many other words, those meanings have increased incredibly just by talking to people who are in situations where those words apply more than I could imagine. And those words aren't enough. For me to say that word is not enough. They know if I say that word and it doesn't have anything behind it and it's hollow, and they'll call me on it. And that's how I get to grow. The callers will say, it sounds like I'm reading a script if I'm not truly there with them. And when I am, and it works, there's a whole lot more to it than just the name of that emotion. To portray the depth and the breadth of the meaning of those words, those names, is something that I knew was going to be intimidating from the beginning of this project. In a way, I gave up on that, trying to portray it, because it was trying to pin down and put a label in a neat little box of an emotion, which science, in a way, has done. But even with the science, there are disagreements as to whether emotions are categorical or on dimensions, and which is the best way to do that. The dimensions and categories don't agree with each other. They don't relate to each other necessarily. And then they have different populations who have different reactions to things. Certain stimuli are labeled with multiple names. So even within the science, it shows the difficulty to label these things. Put it against real life, and it's just that much more. And I needed to bring it into real life. I couldn't leave it on the page, and with these little inspirations that I took, sure, I could have made a picture, or made a dance based on some picture I found in a book under the title Sadness. And I could have used downward slopes and black and all these other things, the aesthetics of sadness. Now, what I thought to do in the first place, true, but it got kind of hokey and huge and didn't feel right at all. I had that creative depression, basically, last semester, and that was while I was trying to do this work and keep things in boxes. And I was keeping myself in a box, emotionally and creatively, by not looking into the depth and the meaning of these emotions. And in order to do that, I had to encounter them, which I did as I completed training with the Crisis Center. It changed me and let me out of my emotional box. And as I let that affect my creativity, it let me out of my creative box too. So my identity of myself as a scientist creating dance has changed to a feeler and a human person with a scientific perspective behind me, looking forward into a dance and creating that dance as I move forward and grow. Dance is how I grow. Science is a way for me to watch myself grow, but dance is what actually brings me forward into the growth. I was trying to make scientific emotions, which the lab has done, yes, but only to a certain extent. The depth of the emotions that they induce in people are not of a depth that I believe I could measure in an audience. If they come for art, they're seeking something that is much more universal and personally touching. The universality I was going for, I was trying to get to through vagueness, which just disperses the meaning and leaves it with nothing of importance for an individual. Specificity can lead to universality. I had to have intent, which has still been difficult to do. But I got off of this, I can try to do, this emotion is that emotion and compare them. Out of the 5, even that was a difficult choice to make. But then I got down to just the one emotion, thinking, oh, I'll do this one this semester and the other the next. But I never finished the first one. It was too general to have an impact. I like the idea of a collage. I like the whole postmodern deconstruction idea. I wasn't deconstructing. I was constructing crap. I was making a collage, yeah, but I wasn't making a collage from pieces that came from one thing that blew up the image of a very specific thing. I was drawing from such broad things that they didn't relate, and I left the audience confused. I'm sure they laughed, and they were definitely intrigued by the very first piece I showed, which was math, with people laughing, and it looked like crying because I couldn't see their faces. That's still interesting to me. But portraying emotion for the sake of inducing it, but not having there be any actual emotion involved in it, which was very difficult to work with in my dancers, it just wasn't working for me. That particular method wasn't going to fly. Being the introspective, hopefully soon-to-be counseling student that I am, the thing that was more important to me and carried much more weight and meaning to me for my process was how I reacted to that then. The fact that I feel I failed the fall semester. Fail forward is a phrase that's nice to use there. I failed, but I came out of it in a way that I think has been good. Not easy, but good. I think I realized I needed to make it more personal when I successfully created a solo. It was the best thing I did last semester, and it's really been a source of motivation since then. I got to a breaking point, sort of, where I just needed to present myself. And so I created that yellow dress solo that I did. And I think I'm still working with it. Some of the music I've listened to on the way down, I was like, that'd do it for the piece. But that piece really gave me a lot of confidence in that I could still create, because I really doubted my creative abilities and was hating anything I did that had to do with dance while I was stuck into that project last semester. Slid into the rest of my life. It was not pleasant. And I think I just got to the point of frustration. That was where I created it. So something that did come out of that, other than for this project. But that solo then made me realize that what I get my inspiration from, and I had to write a paper about this for my comp class too around that time, my inspiration comes from my own personal growth, my own personal processes. I can't draw from the vagueness of emotions that 3,000 people contributed to for some statistics. Yeah, it's cool, but the scientist is not my primary identity. My identity forms through my growth and the processes that are so important to me in that growth as an dancer. Scientist is a perspective. It's the I looking at the dancer, me. I had to be me, not the I. The I has a lot to say about me, the thinking part, and I still slide back into that when I start to try to make things make sense. But I'm trying to get back more into the me and the being with this piece now, because that's the part that's so important, and that was what came out in my solos that I want to show in this group piece now. I had the opportunity with multiple dancers to show these different parts of myself at work, as well as the outside world that I'm reacting to in a way. Getting close to Gainesville now, that's good. So I did a write-up last night. It's going to go in the program for the symposium tomorrow. And I had to base it off of the one from last year's dance piece that was in the symposium. But it was interesting, looking at a project, it just seems to make so much sense. Like, why wouldn't you do a dance about history and how dance can relate to the portrayals of history that we have in other contexts, like history books and photos and places to visit, that kind of thing. It makes such sense. And then here I am. Let's make people feel emotions by portraying them in discrete little bits. Okay. Yeah, that's not so bad, until I have to actually face the emotions in order to portray them, because I was trying to stay sterile and wear rubber gloves with this. That didn't work, and it's not going to work, and that's a process I need to keep going through, particularly knowing my tendency to try to overthink things and stay removed. I've gotten a lot better about not doing that, and that's what the piece is about, really. And the choreographer I referred to, she made it very personal. It was very emotional to her, but I hadn't let it do that for me when I was exploring things that other people put in front of me. I mean, I put them in front of myself, but they were from someone else's perspective. They were from many other people's perspectives, actually, being the average. It's been really cool for me to have this project happening this year, though, as I'm trying to become the counselor and be the person that can become the counselor, at least. I had a grad school interview today. It's really cool. I had another one earlier this week, too, and I was able to refer to this in both. that I'm in a process of being able to be more present. It's been a really important point of growth for me this year that I've learned mainly through dance, also a lot through the Crisis Center, and together it's very meaningful. So I was able to refer in both interviews to the fact that I'm learning not to just observe things and not to stand back and say, oh, shoot, that looks bad for you, but to thank you, but to say, like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, but let me get in this with you and then feel it and understand. It's not much more real.